The great meeting hall was filled with fear. Never before had the Galactic Council seen such terror in the eyes of their strongest warriors. Ambassador Zethkar stood at the center of the room, his tall insect-like body shaking. His dark shell, which normally shined with pride, now looked dull and worn. Behind him, bright pictures showed the destruction that had swept across the galaxy like a terrible storm. The Devourers have destroyed 17 star systems in just 3 weeks, Zethkar said, his voice breaking through the translation machine. Our biggest war fleets, the strongest ships we ever built, were crushed like tiny insects. These creatures do not talk to us. They do not listen to reason. They just eat everything they find. The other council members moved nervously in their seats. Representatives from 100 different worlds sat around the massive circular table. There were the proud hegemony with their golden skin and bright eyes, the trade consortium members with their metal bodies and blinking lights, the fierce warrior clans covered in scars from countless battles. All of them had sent their best ships to fight the Devourers. All of them had watched their fleets disappear into the dark, moving mass that was the enemy swarm. Ambassador Clara of the Synthetic Collective spoke next. Her crystal body flickered with blue light as she processed information faster than any living mind could think. We have tried everything, she said in her mechanical voice. Our energy weapons pass through them like they are made of nothing. Our missiles explode but do no damage. Even our planet-killing bombs only make them angry. War Prime Garek slammed his massive fist on the table. The sound echoed through the hall like thunder. He was the leader of the Titan clans, warriors, who had never lost a battle in over 1,000 years. His body was covered in metal armor, and his red eyes burned with rage and shame. My warriors have fought for generations, he growled. We have conquered armies that numbered in the billions. But these things, they are not alive in any way we understand. They move like liquid death, and everything they touch simply stops existing. The holographic displays behind Zethkar changed to show the path of destruction. System after system had gone dark. Worlds that had been home to trillions of people were now empty space filled only with dust and debris. The Devourers moved in, a straight line through the galaxy, consuming everything in their path. Planets, moons, space stations, even the stars themselves seemed to dim when the swarm passed nearby. How many have we lost? Asked Elder Thrain of the Peaceful Worlds Alliance. Her voice was barely a whisper, but in the silent hall, everyone heard her clearly. She was old, even by the standards of her long-lived species. Her white hair flowed around her face like silver water, and her gentle eyes had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. Zethkar looked down at his datapad. The numbers made his stomach sick. Military losses, 4,200,000 ships. Civilian losses ... He paused, unable to say the words. We estimate 47 billion people are dead or missing. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft humming of the translation machines. 47 billion lives. The number was so large that most minds could not truly understand it. Entire species had been wiped out in just 3 weeks. Cultures that had existed for thousands of years were gone forever. What do we know about them? Asked Captain Vex of the Explorer Corps. She was younger than most council members, but her ship had been one of the few to encounter the Devourers and survive. Her blue skin still showed the scars from radiation burns, and her left arm was missing, replaced by a mechanical substitute. Where did they come from? What do they want? Zethkar activated another display. The image showed a mass of writhing, darkness that seemed to hurt the eyes to look at. The creatures moved like liquid, but they had no fixed shape. Sometimes they looked like giant worms, sometimes like clouds of living smoke. Always they were surrounded by smaller beings that flickered in and out of sight. Our scientists believe they came from outside our galaxy, Sethkar explained. They appeared suddenly at the edge of the Outer Rim territories. No warning, no advance scouts. One day the space was empty. The next day they were there, consuming everything they could find. But what do they want? Captain Vex asked again. Do they want our planets? Our resources? Are they trying to conquer us, or just destroy us? We do not know, Clara admitted. Her crystal body flickered with frustration. For a being that processed information at the speed of light, not knowing something was painful. They do not respond to any communication attempts. We have tried every language, every signal type, even basic mathematics. They simply ignore us and continue eating. War Prime Garek stood up, his massive frame towering over the table. Then we fight them until they are all dead, he declared. I will gather every warrior in the galaxy. We will build new ships, bigger weapons. We will not let these creatures destroy everything our ancestors built. With what? Elder Thrain asked sadly. You just heard the numbers. Half our fleet is gone. The shipyards that could build new vessels are either destroyed or in the path of the swarm. Even if we could build new ships, what makes you think they would work any better than the ones we already lost? The truth of her words settled over the council like a heavy blanket. They were the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. For thousands of years, they had been the masters of space. They had conquered diseases, ended wars, and brought peace to billions of worlds. But now, faced with an enemy they could not understand or communicate with, they felt helpless as children. There is one option we have not tried, Clara said quietly. Her words were so soft that several council members had to lean forward to hear her. There is one species we have not contacted. Who? Sethkar asked, though something in his stomach told him he would not like the answer. The humans of Earth. Clara replied. They have been watching our conflicts from their small corner of the Orion Arm. We have ignored them for 30 years, but they are still there. A wave of uncomfortable laughter passed through the hall. Several council members actually smiled for the first time in weeks. The humans? The primitive mammals who had barely learned to travel faster than light. The species that lived on a single world and had never even tried to expand beyond their own solar system? What could they possibly do? War Prime Garek asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Their ships are made of metal and chemical fuel. They do not even have proper energy shields. Their weapons are kinetic projectiles and nuclear explosives. Technology we stopped using 1,000 years ago. They are children, agreed Elder Thrain. Violent, aggressive children who have spent their entire history fighting wars among themselves. What could such a young species offer that we cannot provide? But even as they spoke, another alarm sounded through the hall. A new message had arrived from the front lines. The Devourers had consumed 2 more systems while they had been talking. The enemy was getting closer to the core worlds with every passing. Our Sethkar looked around the table at the faces of the galaxy's greatest leaders. He saw fear, desperation, and the beginning of panic. They were running out of options, running out of time, and running out of hope. Perhaps, he said slowly, it is time to put aside our pride. The humans may be primitive, but they are also survivors. Their world has faced extinction events that would have destroyed most species, yet they are still alive. Maybe their different way of thinking could help us see something we have missed. The debate that followed was heated but brief. Some council members argued that contacting such a primitive species was beneath their dignity. Others worried that the humans would demand too much in return for their help. But as more reports came in of systems going dark, pride became a luxury they could no longer afford. The vote was close. 51 members voted yes, 49 voted no. By the smallest possible margin, the Galactic Council decided to call upon the humans of Earth. As the meeting ended, and the various ambassadors returned to their ships, none of them truly believed that the primitive species from the small blue world could save them. They were simply running out of choices. In their darkest hour, they were willing to try anything, even asking for help from the children they had ignored for so long. The message was sent through subspace, traveling faster than light across the galaxy to reach the small solar system on the edge of known space. It was a simple request for military assistance, the kind of formal communication the Council had sent thousands of times to their member species. None of them realized that they were about to learn the difference between a civilization that had never faced true hardship and a species that had been forged in the fires of survival. The humans were about to show the galaxy what it really meant to fight for your life. Admiral Sarah Chun was drinking her morning coffee when the message arrived. She sat in her small office on Luna Station, looking out at the gray surface of Earth's moon through a thick window. The office was not fancy. Metal desk, 2 chairs, and walls covered with star charts and battle plans. Chun liked it simple. She had learned long ago that fancy things did not win wars. The holographic projector on her desk suddenly came to life. Blue light filled the room as alien faces appeared in front of her. Chun had seen these beings before in intelligence reports, but never speaking directly to humans. The Galactic Council had ignored Earth for 30 years. They had sent polite messages saying humans were too young to join their meetings, too primitive, too violent. Now here they were, asking for help. The lead speaker was tall and insect-like, with dark shell covering his body. His voice came through the translation computer in perfect English, but Chun could hear the fear underneath the formal words. Humanity, the message began. The Galactic Council requests immediate military assistance against an existential threat, known as the Devourers. This enemy has destroyed 17 star systems in 3 weeks. Our combined fleets have been unable to stop their advance. Time is critical. Please respond with your available fleet strength and estimated time of arrival at the battle zone. Chun played the message 3 times. Each time, she noticed new details. The way the alien's hands shook slightly. The burn marks visible on another. Speaker's blue skin. The desperate look in their eyes that needed no translation. She forwarded the message to Earth Command with a short note. They're scared. Finally scared enough to ask the children for help. The response from Earth took 6 hours. During that time, Chun watched the news feeds from the outer galaxy. More systems going dark. Refugee ships fleeing toward the core worlds with stories of unstoppable horror. The mighty Galactic Council, which had ruled space for thousands of years, was falling apart. When Earth's reply finally came, it was not what anyone expected. Instead of Admiral Harrison, with fleet numbers and battle plans, the message came from a quiet man in a white coat. Dr. James Wright was Earth's top expert on alien life forms. He worked in a small laboratory in Geneva, studying samples that Earth's spy networks had collected over the years. Greetings, Galactic Council, Dr. Wright said in his calm voice. We have received your request for military assistance. Before we can help you, we need more information about your enemy. Could you please send us all available data on these Devourers? Scanner readings, battle records, any biological samples you might have recovered. We want to understand what you are fighting before we decide how to fight it. The message was sent through subspace to the council chambers. The reaction was immediate and loud. Understand what we're fighting? War Prime Garrick roared, his massive fist crashing down on the table. We are fighting for our lives. We need ships and weapons, not scientists asking questions. Ambassador Clara's crystal body flickered with confusion. This is not how military assistance works, she said to the other council members. When we request help, species send fleets immediately. Why do the humans want to study the enemy instead of fighting it? Elder Thrain was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke in her soft voice. Perhaps because they think differently than we do. Their species has survived by adapting, not just by fighting. Maybe they see something we have missed. The debate went on for hours. Some council members wanted to ignore the humans and try other options. Others argued that they had no other options left. In the end, desperation won. They sent everything they had to Earth, scanner data from 100 battles, recordings of devourer movements, even small pieces of the enemy that had been recovered. From destroyed ships. Dr. Wright received the data in his laboratory and immediately went to work. He was joined by teams of scientists from around Earth, biologists, physicists, computer experts, and others worked around the clock studying the information. What they found changed everything. The first breakthrough came after 36 hours. Dr. Maria Santos, a specialist in animal behavior, was studying the movement patterns of the devourer swarm. She had been awake for 2 days straight, living on coffee and determination. "James, you need to see this," she called across the laboratory. Her voice was excited, but also worried. "Look at these movement patterns. They're not random at all." Dr. Wright hurried over to her computer screen. The display showed the path the devourers had taken through space. Red lines marked their course, from system to system. At first glance, it looked like chaos. But Maria had found something else. "See how they always move in the same direction?" She pointed at the screen. "They never turn around, never go backward. And look at the speed. They're moving as fast as they can, while still consuming enough matter to fuel their journey. This isn't the behavior of hunters or conquerors. What is it then?" Wright asked, though he was beginning to understand. "They're running away from something," Maria said quietly. "The consumption, the speed, the straight line path. These are the actions of refugees, not invaders. They're fleeing from something so terrible that they'll destroy everything in their path just to keep moving." The second breakthrough came 12 hours later. Dr. Kim Patel, a specialist in genetics, had been studying the biological samples. The pieces of devourer matter were unlike anything Earth science had ever seen. They seemed to be alive, but not in any way that made sense. "The DNA is all wrong," Patel explained to the team gathered around his workstation. "It's not DNA at all, actually. It's something else, something artificial. But here's the strange part. There are markers in the genetic code that suggest extreme stress. Trauma markers that you normally only see in species that have been tortured or experimented on." Wright felt a cold chill run down his back. Tortured by what? "That's what we need to find out," Patel replied. "But whatever did this to them has technology far beyond anything in the galaxy today. The genetic manipulation required to create these beings would take millions of years to develop." The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Dr. Lisa Chun, Sarah's younger sister, was an expert in ancient history and archaeology. She had been studying the oldest records Earth had intercepted from galactic communications over the years. "I found references to something called the Harvesters," she announced to the team. "The records are millions of years old, from civilizations that existed long before the current galactic powers. According to these texts, the Harvesters were a species that consumed entire galaxies before going into hibernation. The records say they wake up every few million years to feed again." The laboratory fell silent as the implications sank in. Dr. Wright felt his hands shaking as he reached for his communication device. They had found the answer, but it was worse than anyone had imagined. The message he sent to the Galactic Council was simple but devastating. "We have analyzed your data. The creatures you call devourers are not your enemy. They are refugees fleeing from something much worse. Based on our analysis, we believe they are running from an ancient species called the Harvesters, which appears to be awakening in the galactic core. You have been fighting the victims while the real threat approaches from behind them. The silence from the council lasted for 6 hours. When they finally responded, it was Elder Thrain who spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried across space to Earth with crystal clarity. If what you say is true, then we have made a terrible mistake. We have been forcing these creatures to stop and fight us, to consume more resources to replace what they lost in battle. We have been slowing down their escape. Dr. Wright nodded, even though he knew she could not see him. Exactly, and according to our calculations, the delay you have caused means the Harvesters will reach inhabited space in approximately 6 months. The Devourers were your early warning system, and you destroyed it. The next message from the Council was desperate. What can we do? How do we fight something that made the Devourers run in terror? Dr. Wright looked around his laboratory at the tired faces of his team. Earth's best scientists had worked for 3 days straight to solve this puzzle. Now they had to find a solution to save not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. We don't fight them, Wright said finally. Not yet. First, we save the Devourers. We help them escape. And we prepare for what's coming. The response from the Galactic Council was immediate and angry. War Prime Garek's voice boomed through the speakers. Save them? They have killed billions of our people. Because you forced them to, Wright replied calmly. They were starving and desperate. You can hate them for what they did, but if you want to survive what's coming next, you need to let them go. And you need to trust us to show you how. Admiral Sarah Chun, watching the conversation from her office on Luna Station, smiled for the first time in days. Her little sister had always been the smart one in the family. But Sarah was starting to understand that Earth was about to show the galaxy something it had never seen before. The humans were about to teach the mighty Galactic Council the difference between fighting and thinking. And if the Council was very lucky, they might just survive the lesson. The human research ship Curiosity was tiny compared to the massive war vessels that filled the Council fleet, where the alien dreadnoughts stretched for kilometers and bristled with weapons. The Earth ship looked like a small metal box with engines attached. Most Council members thought it was insulting that humanity had sent such a small vessel to help with the greatest crisis in galactic history. Captain Maria Rodriguez didn't care what they thought. She had volunteered to take her research ship into the most dangerous region of space because she believed Dr. Wright was right. The galaxy had been fighting the wrong enemy, and someone needed to prove it before billions more people died. Curiosity held 12 scientists and 8 Marines. The scientists came from different countries on Earth, but they all shared the same goal: understand the Devourers before anyone else died. The Marines were there just in case understanding wasn't enough. Dr. Wright himself was on the ship, along with specialists in biology, physics, and computer analysis. They worked in the small laboratory, while Captain Rodriguez carefully moved the ship closer to the danger zone. Behind them, the Council fleet followed at a safe distance, ready to run if the humans made a mistake. Picking up the first traces of Devourer presence, reported Lieutenant Kim, his ship's sensor operator. She was young for such an important job, but Earth couldn't afford to send only experienced people. They needed their best minds, regardless of age. Dr. Wright looked at the readings on his screen. The empty space ahead of them wasn't really empty. It was filled with tiny particles of matter that had once been planets, stars, and living beings. The Devourers had passed through this region weeks ago, but their presence could still be detected. Start collecting samples, Wright ordered. I want to analyze everything they left behind. For 6 hours, the Curiosity slowly moved through the debris field. The ship's collectors gathered dust particles, energy readings, and trace chemicals. Every piece of information was important. The Devourers didn't communicate, but maybe their leftovers could tell the story they refused to speak. The first surprise came when Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the team's energy specialist, finished analyzing the particle traces. "Dr. Wright, these readings don't make sense," she said, staring at her computer screen with confusion. "What do you mean?" Wright asked, moving to look over her shoulder. "The energy signatures show that the Devourers were badly damaged when they passed through here," Tanaka explained. "Not damaged by weapons or fighting. Damaged by something else. Something that happened before they reached this system." Wright felt his heart beating faster. "Show me." The data painted a clear picture. The Devourers had been injured before they started consuming this star system. Their biosignatures showed signs of severe trauma, like animals that had been burned, poisoned. They had eaten everything in their path, not because they wanted to, but because they were dying and desperately needed energy to heal. "My God," whispered Dr. Sarah Kim, the team's biologist. "They weren't attacking. They were trying to survive." The second discovery came 12 hours later, when the Curiosity reached the edge of the next system. The Devourers had passed through. Here more recently, only days ago. The destruction was fresh, and something else was visible in the debris. "Captain Rodriguez, I'm reading life signs," Lieutenant Kim reported, her voice excited. "Small ones, but definitely alive." "Put it on screen," Rodriguez ordered. The main display showed a cluster of tiny objects floating in space. They were barely larger than insects, but the ship's scanners confirmed they were alive. More importantly, they were moving toward the Curiosity instead of running away. "They're trying to communicate," Dr. Wright realized. "Bring them aboard, but use full containment." Protocols. The creatures were placed in a special chamber where they could be studied safely. Under the ship's powerful microscopes, the truth became clear. These tiny beings were Devourers, but they were different from the massive swarm that had terrorized the galaxy. They were scouts, and they were trying to warn the humans about something. Dr. Kim worked for hours to understand the creature's communication method. They used chemical signals and light patterns instead of sounds or radio waves. Slowly, painfully, she began to decode their message. "They're saying, 'Behind us,'" she announced to the gathered team. Over and over again. "Behind us, death comes behind us." Wright felt cold fear wash over him. They're not just running from something. They're trying to warn us about it. The final piece of the puzzle came when the Curiosity began tracing the Devourers. Path backward through space. Using the data from the tiny scouts and the ship's long-range sensors, they followed the trail of destruction in reverse. System after system showed the same pattern. The Devourers arriving injured and desperate, consuming everything they could find, then fleeing toward the outer galaxy as fast as possible. But as they traced the path further back, toward the galactic core, the readings became disturbing. The destruction was worse in the older systems, much worse. And there were other signs, traces of something that made the Devourers look like harmless children. "Dr. Wright," Captain Rodriguez called from the bridge. "Long-range sensors are picking up something in the galactic core. Something big." Wright hurried to the bridge and looked at the sensor display. What he saw made his blood freeze. Deep in the heart of the galaxy, something was moving. The readings were faint because of the distance, but they showed massive objects that were definitely artificial. Ships or structures or something else entirely. "How big are they?" Wright asked quietly. Lieutenant Kim checked her readings twice before answering. "The largest ones are approximately 1,000 kilometers long." The bridge fell silent. The biggest ships in the Council fleet were only 50 kilometers long. These things were 20 times larger. "And they're moving toward us," Kim added. In a whisper, Dr. Wright felt the weight of the galaxy's future pressing down on his shoulders. The Devourers hadn't been lying. Something was coming, something so terrible that it had driven the swarm to flee across the entire galaxy. And now that something was following them, "We need to contact the Council immediately," Wright said. "And we need to contact Earth. This changes everything." The message that went out from the Curiosity sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. The small human ship had discovered what the galaxy's greatest military minds had missed. They were all about to face an enemy that made their current problems look small when Dr. Wright appeared on the holographic communicators in the Council. Chambers, his face was grim. Behind him, the data from their discoveries painted a picture of approaching doom. "The creatures you call Devourers are indeed refugees," Wright began. "But they're not just running from any enemy. They're fleeing from something called the Harvesters, an ancient species that appears to have been dormant in the galactic core for millions of years." He activated the sensor readings from their ship. The Council members watched in growing horror as the data showed the massive objects moving through space toward them. "According to the Devourer scouts we captured, the Harvesters wake up every few million years to feed. They consume entire galaxies, then go back to sleep. The last time they were active, most of the current galactic civilizations didn't even exist." War Prime Garek's voice was barely controlled. "How long until they reach inhabited space?" Wright checked his calculations one more time. "Based on their current speed and the delay caused by fighting the Devourers, we estimate 6 months until the first Harvester ships reach the outer colonies." The silence in the Council chambers was broken only by the soft sound of breathing and the hum of the translation machines. 6 months to prepare for an enemy that had consumed galaxies. Elder Thrain was the first to speak. "What do the Devourer scouts tell us about these Harvesters? What are their capabilities?" Wright looked at the data Dr. Kim had decoded from the Yo. Tiny creatures. The chemical messages painted a picture of nightmare. According to the scouts, the Harvesters don't just destroy civilizations. They harvest them. They take the knowledge, the technology, the biological essence of every species they encounter, and add it to their own capabilities. They've been doing this for millions of years across multiple galaxies. So they'll be using weapons and technologies from civilizations we've never heard of, Clara said, her crystal body flickering with fear. Technologies that might be millions of years more advanced than ours. Yes, Wright confirmed. And the Devourers were just the first wave. The Harvesters drove them out of the core systems to clear the way for their main force. The swarm was never meant to conquer anything. They were meant to weaken galactic defenses and consume resources that the Harvesters could later claim. The implications were staggering. The galaxy had spent weeks fighting creatures that were actually victims. In doing so, they had weakened their own defenses and slowed the Devourers' escape, making everything worse. "We have to let the Devourers go," Wright continued. "Help them escape to the outer rim, where they can't cause more damage. Then we need to prepare for the real enemy." "Prepare how?" asked Captain Vex. "If they have technologies from millions of years of conquest, what can we possibly do against them?" Wright was quiet for a long moment. He thought about Earth, about Admiral Sarah Chun stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, but she was not asking for permission. She was telling them what humanity planned to do. The holographic display behind her showed something that made several council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Detailed plans for the largest humanitarian operation in galactic history. "We are not going to fight the Devourers," Chun announced, her voice cutting through the nervous whispers that filled the chamber. "We are going to feed them." The reaction was immediate and loud. War Prime Garrick rose from his seat, his massive frame towering over the table. "Feed them?" he roared. "These creatures have killed billions of our people, and you want to give them more resources? Ambassador Clara's crystal body flickered rapidly as she processed the concept. "This suggestion does not compute with standard military doctrine," she said in her mechanical voice. "You do not supply resources to hostile forces." But Admiral Chun had expected this reaction. She had studied the galactic mindset for 30 years, watching how they approached every problem as either a battle to be won or a surrender to be avoided. They had never learned the third option that humans knew well. Sometimes you survived by changing the rules entirely. "Listen to me carefully," Chun said, her voice remaining calm despite the chaos around her. "The Devourers are not your enemy. They are refugees. Scared, hungry, desperate refugees who will do anything to survive. You have been fighting them because you see them as invaders. But what if we treated them as what they really are?" She activated the holographic display, showing the path of destruction the Devourer swarm had carved through space. But overlaid on that destruction was something new, a proposed route leading away from inhabited systems toward the empty regions at the galaxy's edge. "We are going to create a corridor," Charn explained. "A pathway of supply stations stretching from their current position to the outer rim. Each station will contain concentrated biomatter and energy sources, enough food to satisfy their hunger without forcing them to consume inhabited worlds." Elder Thrain leaned forward, her ancient eyes studying the display with new interest. "You want to guide them away from populated areas by offering them an easier alternative to conquest." "Exactly," Chun confirmed. "Think about it logically. They consume planets because they need the energy and raw materials. But planets are inefficient food sources. Most of a planet's mass is rock and metal that they cannot use. We can provide the same nutritional value in a much more concentrated form." The chamber fell quiet as the council members began to understand the scope of what humanity was proposing. The supply stations would need to be massive, containing enough resources to feed creatures that normally consumed entire worlds. The logistics alone would be staggering. Captain Vex was the first to voice the obvious question. "Where would you get enough resources for such an operation? Even if we combined the industrial output of every member species, it would take years to produce that much biomatter." Chun smiled for the first time since the crisis began. "You are thinking like galactic civilizations. You build when you need something, produce when demand arises. Humans think differently. We have been preparing for this day for 30 years. The display changed to show the Sol system, Earth's small corner of space that the galaxy had ignored for decades. But what the Council saw now was not the primitive system they remembered. Every planet, moon, and asteroid was covered with industrial infrastructure. Massive factories, automated mining operations, and production facilities that stretched across entire continents. "While you were busy with your politics and trade disputes," Chen continued, "we were building. Every day for 30 years, we prepared for the war we knew would eventually come. We studied your battles, learned from your victories and defeats, and built the tools we would need to survive." Ambassador Zethkar stared at the display in disbelief. "The energy requirements alone. How do you power such massive industrial operations?" "We learned to harvest energy directly from our star," Chun replied simply. "Solar collection arrays that you cannot see from long-range scans. Fusion reactors built inside asteroids. Geothermal taps that go down to our planet's core. When you live on one world and want to defend it properly, you learn to use every resource available." War Prime Garek was studying the battle plans with the eye of a professional soldier. "These supply stations, they are not just feeding points. They are defensive positions." Chun nodded approvingly. The warrior clan leader had spotted what others had missed. Each station contains not just food, but monitoring equipment. Sensors that will track the Devourer's movements and health. Communication arrays that will let us talk to them, eventually. And yes, defensive systems in case our peaceful approach fails. But why? Clara asked, her voice filled with confusion. Why would humanity spend such resources to save creatures that are not even your enemies? You have never been attacked by the Devourers. They have never threatened your world. The question hung in the air like smoke. It was the heart of what the galactic civilizations could not understand about humanity. Why would a species risk everything to save strangers? Chun was quiet for a long moment, thinking about how to explain something that was fundamental to human nature. Because, she said finally, that is what people do when they see someone drowning. You do not ask if they deserve to be saved. You do not calculate the cost of rescue. You jump in the water and pull them out, because that is what makes you human. She paused, looking around the chamber at the alien faces watching her. The Devourers are drowning in fear and hunger. Yes, they have killed billions of your people, but they did it because they were desperate. If we can remove that desperation, they will stop killing. Elder Thrain spoke softly, her voice filled with something that might have been wonder. Your species chooses compassion, even toward enemies. Especially toward enemies, Chun corrected. Because enemies are often just people who haven't been given a better choice. The debate that followed lasted 18 hours. Some council members argued that humanity's plan was too risky, too expensive, too naive. Others pointed out that every military solution had already failed, and they were running out of alternatives. In the end, desperation won again. The galaxy was dying, and the humans offered the only plan that might save it. The vote was unanimous, though several members clearly had doubts, but Chun had not told them everything. As the council session ended and the various representatives returned to their ships, she activated a private communication channel to Earth Command. The face that appeared on her screen belonged to General Patricia Hayes, the head of Earth's military forces. How much did you tell them? Hayes asked without preamble. Enough to get their cooperation, Sean replied, but not enough to frighten them. Hayes nodded grimly. Good. Are you ready to begin Phase 1? Chun looked out at the stars, thinking about the massive ships that were already moving through space toward the supply points. Ships that the Council had not seen, built in secret facilities that existed only in Earth's classified files. The convoy ships are already in position, she reported. Industrial fabricators, automated construction systems, and defense platforms. We can have the first supply station operational within 48 hours. And the special equipment? Chun's smile was cold as winter. The Devourer communication interface is ready for testing. If these creatures are intelligent enough to run from the harvesters, they are intelligent enough to make a deal with us. What happened next would be remembered as either the greatest act of mercy in galactic history or the most terrifying display of human efficiency. Across hundreds of light years of space, massive Earthships appeared seemingly from nowhere. They moved with purpose and coordination that spoke of years of planning and preparation. The supply stations that took shape were marvels of engineering. Each one was the size of a small moon, containing enough concentrated nutrition to feed a devourer swarm for weeks. But they were more than just food sources. They were communication hubs, monitoring stations, and if necessary, weapons platforms. The first test came when the devourer swarm encountered the initial supply station. The creatures had been moving toward a populated system, following their usual pattern of consumption. But when they reached the station and found abundant food that did not fight back, their behavior changed. Instead of the frenzied destruction that had marked their passage through other systems, the devourers fed, carefully, almost gratefully. And for the first time since the crisis began, they tried to communicate. Dr. Wright, monitoring from the research station aboard the Curiosity, watched the data streams with growing excitement. They're responding to the communication protocols. He announced to his team. Basic mathematical concepts, chemical signals. They understand that we're trying to talk to them. The message that came back was simple but profound. Thank you. Why help? Danger follows. It was the first time any galactic species had heard the Devourers speak. Their language was not sound or radio waves, but complex chemical signals that told stories of terror and flight, stories of an ancient evil that had driven them from their home galaxy and pursued them across the void. Danger follows, Dr. Wright repeated quietly. They're still trying to warn us. The Devourer evacuation had been a complete success. For the first time in months, the galaxy could breathe again. The massive swarm that had terrorized 17 star systems was now safely beyond the rim, following humanity's supply corridor, to empty space where they could recover from their long flight. The grateful creatures had even shared their knowledge about the approaching harvesters, providing tactical data that no galactic civilization possessed. But the relief was short-lived. Admiral Chun stood in her command center on Luna Station, watching the long-range sensors with growing unease. The readings from the galactic core had changed dramatically in the past week. Where before there had been slow, steady movement, now there was rapid acceleration. The harvesters were no longer following their prey at a leisurely pace. They were racing toward inhabited space with obvious anger. They know we helped the Devourers escape, reported Captain Lisa Park, Chon's intelligence officer, and they are not happy about it. The first harvester probe ship appeared without warning in the outer territories, a region of sparse settlements and mining operations. It was smaller than the massive vessels detected in the core, but still dwarfed anything in the galactic fleet. The ship was a perfect black sphere, 200 kilometers in diameter, that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The probe's message was broadcast across all frequencies in every known language simultaneously. The voice that spoke was cold and ancient, carrying the weight of millions of years and countless destroyed civilizations. Inhabitants of this galaxy, the voice began, each word pronounced with mechanical precision. We are the harvesters. We have come to reclaim what belongs to us. The creatures you call Devourers are our property, bred and modified to serve our purposes. By interfering with our harvest, you have committed theft on a galactic scale. The transmission paused, and for a moment, the only sound was the hum of electronics across 100 listening posts. The species responsible for this interference will be consumed first as an example to others. The rest will be processed in the order we determine. Resistance is pointless. Negotiation is impossible. Surrender is not acceptable. You exist now only to serve our purposes. The message ended with coordinates, a meeting point in empty space where the harvesters demanded the immediate return of the Devourer swarm. The time frame given was 72 hours dot in the emergency council session that followed. Panic filled the chamber like a toxic gas. Representatives shouted over each other, some demanding immediate compliance with the harvester demands, others calling for desperate military preparations that they all knew would be useless. We have to give them back, Ambassador Sethkar said, his voice shaking with fear. The Devourers, I mean. If we return them, maybe the harvesters will leave the rest of us alone. You cannot seriously suggest that, Elder Thring replied, her gentle voice carrying an edge of steel. Those creatures are refugees under our protection. We would be condemning them to slavery or worse. War Prime Garrick slammed his fist on the table, but the sound was weak compared to his usual rage. Protection? He growled. What protection can we offer? Our fleets combined could not stop a single harvester probe ship. We are insects arguing with gods. But Admiral Chun, watching the debate from her communication link, remained silent. She was waiting for something, and when it came, her expression didn't change at all. The second harvester message arrived exactly 73 hours after the first. This time, the ancient voice carried unmistakable fury. The deadline has passed. The stolen property has not been returned. The species responsible for this theft will now face judgment. We begin with the primitive mammals of the third planet Sol system. Their interference ends now. The transmission cut off, and across the galaxy, long-range sensors detected movement in the galactic core. 3 massive harvester ships, each over 1,000 kilometers long, began moving toward Earth at speeds that defied known physics. The panic in the council chambers reached new heights. Several representatives actually began to weep, while others started evacuating their home systems immediately. The humans had doomed them all, but Admiral Chun finally spoke, and her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Let them come. The silence that followed was profound. Every being in the chamber stared at the human admiral as if she had lost her mind. Let them come? Clara's crystal body flickered with disbelief. Admiral, these are not raiders or pirates. These are the beings that destroyed the Devourer's home galaxy. They have technologies beyond our comprehension. Chun's smile was cold and sharp. Yes, they do. And now they're going to learn why that doesn't matter. What happened next would be debated by historians for millennia, assuming any historians survived to write about it. The 3 harvester ships arrived at the edge of the Sol system exactly 48 hours after their threat was issued. They expected to find a primitive civilization cowering in fear, ready to beg for mercy that would never come. Instead, they found a war machine. The space around Earth was filled with ships that had not existed in any galactic database. Sleek, black vessels that moved like living things and seemed to bend reality around them. Weapons platforms that crackled with energy types the harvesters had never encountered. And behind it all, a defensive grid that turned the entire solar system into a fortress. This is impossible. The lead harvester ship transmitted. It's ancient. Voice carrying surprise for the first time in eons. Your species achieved spaceflight only decades ago. You cannot possess such technology. Admiral Chun's response came from every human ship simultaneously, a coordination that spoke of planning and preparation beyond anything the galaxy had imagined. You're right, she said calmly. We couldn't build this technology. So we didn't build it. We took it. The tactical displays in the council chambers showed what came next, though most representatives could barely believe what they were seeing. The human ships didn't attack the harvesters directly. Instead, they began transmitting beta streams, information packages that seemed to confuse and disorient the ancient vessels. What are they doing? War Prime Garrick asked, his voice barely a whisper. Dr. Wright, still aboard the research ship Curiosity, provided the answer. They're showing the harvesters what humanity learned while the galaxy ignored us for 30 years. Every battle, every technology, every weakness and strength of every species we've ever observed. The humans have been studying galactic warfare since first contact, and they've been preparing. But that wasn't the worst of it. As the data streams continued, the harvester ships began to shudder and spark. Their perfect black hulls developed cracks, and their ancient systems started failing in ways that should have been impossible. Impossible, the lead harvester repeated, but its voice was no longer cold and confident. Our systems are protected by quantum encryption matrices developed over millions of years. Nothing should be able to penetrate them. Chun's laughter echoed across space, and it was the most terrifying sound the galaxy had ever heard. You've been asleep for millions of years, she said. We've been awake for 30. Watching and learning from every species in this galaxy. Did you really think we spent that time just building ships? The truth hit the council like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just been preparing militarily during their decades of isolation. They had been studying the galaxy's technology, reverse engineering it, improving it. and combining it in ways no one else had ever imagined. The human ships that now surrounded the harvesters contained technology from 100 different species, refined and enhanced by 3 decades of human ingenuity. Weapons that used hegemony energy principles with warrior clan targeting systems. Shields that combined synthetic computational power with trade consortium, efficiency protocols. But the real weapon wasn't technology at all. It was information. Every species you've conquered, every galaxy you've harvested, you absorbed their knowledge and made it part of yourself. Chun continued as the harvester ships continued to malfunction. You became walking libraries of technological advancement. The problem is, libraries can be hacked. The human data streams weren't just random information. They were carefully crafted virus programs designed to exploit the harvester's greatest strength and turn it into a fatal weakness by absorbing the technology of countless species. The ancient beings had also absorbed their vulnerabilities. And humanity had spent 30 years cataloging every security flaw, every design weakness, every possible point of failure in galactic technology. The first harvester ship simply stopped working. Its massive bulk went dark and began drifting through space like a dead moon. The second ship tried to flee, but human pursuit vessels appeared around it like sharks smelling blood. The third ship managed to transmit one final message before it too succumbed to the information cascade. "This is not possible," it broadcast in a voice filled with something the galaxy had never heard from a harvester before. Fear. "We are eternal. We have consumed galaxies. We cannot be defeated by children." Admiral Chun's final transmission to the dying ship was quiet, almost gentle. "You're not being defeated by children," she said. "You're being defeated by parents. Everything we did, every sacrifice we made, every year we spent preparing, was to protect our family. The galaxy is our family now.